Thank you so much for joining us today. We are super lucky. We have Zach Stephenson joining us today. He is a new administrator, former teacher, high school teacher, who had the privilege of teaching a number of different classes and that sort of thing in high school, mostly social studies oriented, psychology oriented, and is now a vice principal. So we're going to chat with him to see how his journey has been. And I'm so glad that he's able to join us. Zach, welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. B. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here and spread the word about, my pathway and hopefully reach some listeners.
Yeah, which would be great. So you've transitioned from the classroom into administration. So what do you feel are the biggest changes that you have seen moving from that perspective to this perspective?
I think the obvious answer is my view is very narrow in the classroom. Whether it was my 70 kids that I had dealt with, meeting their standards and meeting their social emotional needs. And now it's a much more broad view, 327 kids, I think, now trying to meet all their needs, whether they're behavioral needs, academic needs, social needs, um, as well as the families. Connecting with families was much easier when it was just 70 kids, and now it's a big time suck to like reach out to everybody, making sure everybody's feeling supported. So that's been a huge
Absolutely.
difference for me. The
Huge
number.
difference. Yeah, and I want to talk about Zach's superpower because he has an amazing superpower where he is really able to connect with almost any student, any ability level, and is really able to figure out a way to modify, adjust, create, whatever it may be, curriculum to get them even slightly engaged so that they can touch on that subject. And Zach, what are your go-to strategies for that? Because this is an area where a lot of teachers are feeling like they're struggling, where they're feeling like the kids are really apathetic nowadays and they're really having such a hard time at creating that connection. What do you feel are the tips that you could give to other educators on how to do that?
I think one of the biggest things is perspective and compassion. Um, that's what I've learned is just looking at every learner as a blank slate and taking them for who they are. Learning their interests, learning what engages them, and then modifying your curriculum to meet those needs. As you've kind of alluded to, when I first started, I taught foundations level world history, which was an all IEP special ed world history I had 24 kids, no
It's a
paras.
super fun class for me to be able to observe.
Great. It's very fun, very interesting. So I've taught that level, and I've also taught the advanced placement college level courses. So really molding to what you have in front of you. Speaking with every kid, hey, what are your interests? I'd always send out a survey. What kind of music do you like? Do you like art? Do you like sports? Do you like TV, books, movie? That way you can, when they come in, you do a little do now or a morning meeting, just like, hey, what are some things you do this weekend? And get that connection right off the bat. And then I'm a big believer that students will perform for you if you show that you care about them.
100%.
As simple as it sounds,
Mhm.
I just think that sometimes we forget. Um, and I'm a social studies guy. I'm not going to throw shade at my math folks, but I think some of our curriculum sometimes driven towards meeting criteria, and we as educators over the years we forget to like build those connections. And as simple as it sounds, I think that's very important.
I think also sometimes we end up having to take shortcuts. And I talk about this a lot in my book. It's sometimes we have to take those shortcuts because we feel like we're a slave to the curriculum. Like we
Yeah.
have to get through so much. And unfortunately, it ends up taking more time on the back end of it because we lose some of the learners when that ends up happening and everything else. And a lot of times educators will say to me, but I'm not interested in music genres, or I'm not interested in those things. And I understand that, but if you want to connect with your learners, you've got to learn about what they're interested in. That's really the key. I can't tell you how many times kids have stood there and talked about cars to me and what they're working on and what they're redoing. And I stand there and go, oh, that's great. And then what did you do with the engine after that and everything else? And did you have to adjust the carburetor or anything? I don't know what I'm talking about, but
Just throw it out there, throw the terms
but I'm
out there.
trying to learn. And I'm researching the stuff on the side because it's important to them and they're important to me and they're important to us. So it's really important that we, learn about the things that they want to learn about. And that's a great idea. Sending out surveys at the beginning of the year, that's a super idea as far as being able to get to know them a little bit better. And then how can people utilize that to integrate it more into curriculum?
So, I mean, I think about 6 or 5 years ago, I was teaching the world history class, and not a very fun unit, medieval history. We were talking about like fiefdoms, and like the different, makeup of a social structure in medieval England. Um, and I brought in an Xbox, and some kids brought in the computers, and they built fiefs with their Minecraft games. And I have pictures on my phone still. I've never seen a classroom so engaged in my life.
I bet.
Like every
Everybody,
single kid
right up
was
their
doing it.
alley.
I was like, this is a dream. This is a dream. There's 20 kids in here doing their work, not a single kid distracted.
Yeah.
So that's to me, I was like, anything we can do to make kids engage is what we have to do. And that was, maybe a 2 or 3 day lesson, but it made my year,
Oh yeah,
honestly.
I could totally see them like, Mr. Steve, look at how we created this castle.
It
Like
was
these
huge.
games.
My commencement address in 2022 at Merrimack Valley, I referenced that, and like the kids were like snapping like out there like, yep, I remember that. So those are the things that go a long way, that I'll see them in 20 years and be like, I remember doing that with you.
Oh yeah, and they'll say, you know what? I loved that class because of that activity. And
Yeah.
kids remember that. Do you feel like there's been a change in youth in the last 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, I do. And I don't know why. Part of me wants to say it's like the attention span from social media, because I'm a slave to it too. And whether it's the reels or like it's such an addiction. It's hard to like perform as a teacher and make them as interested as their device.
Absolutely.
That's one change I've seen. The mental health is obviously a major difference too. Like the behaviors, what I'm seeing now, um, is a lot of behaviors, very explosive behaviors without the regulation. And I'm speaking, this is my first year in elementary. I've been in high school. I'm not sure what that's looked like for the past 6 years in elementary, but um, it's kind of troublesome to see a lot of these kids struggling with their emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they definitely, whereas 20 years ago, I worked almost primarily in high schools. I rarely set foot into, I maybe went to an elementary school every 2 months or so, and I'd be there for a week or so and then out. Now I'm in elementary schools every
Hmm.
other day. That's like my primary place of where I'm at, which change happens really quickly, which is nice. So I'm in and out really fast, but there is a lack of that emotional regulation. There's a lack of kids feeling safe. There's a lack of staff feeling safe. And there's a lack of them having the ability to regulate themselves and give themselves self-care. And I think if you look back at about 2006, 2007, where social media kind of started to come onto the scene, computers became bigger, all of a sudden we did start to see that shift because there was less attention happening towards the child and more attention happening with other things. And that drastically impacted things. And I think in the last few years, it significantly impacted things too, because of people being home for periods of time and then being back out and kids feeling like, when's it going to happen again? What else is happening next? And they're like, I am just not feeling myself. I just need a dopamine fix and I can get it off of my social media devices. And for the little guys, it's really about, I don't know how to regulate, but I know if I explode, I'll get some sort of interaction or feedback. And that almost has trained it because the poor introverted kid, they fly under the radar for years. And that's the kid that I'm super worried about because I'm like that, all of a sudden we find out that kid has significant needs as far as supports go years and years later. And they weren't being provided because that kid wasn't disrupting everybody else. It wasn't disrupting the other learners. So definitely something that we're going to have to look at as a society as a whole and educators as a whole in order to get kids back on track and into a better place as far as, those things are concerned. How do you feel the transition has been as far as providing support more to staff at this point, in addition to students? Because you're dealing with a lot of discipline issues and things like that now too, as well, right?
Yeah, so this summer, my principal and I, Jen Moore, she's fantastic. She's literally the best mentor I've ever had. I
That's
could
great.
not be luckier than I am now. We met this summer with the goal of giving our counselors more time to do their job because last year they were putting out a lot of fires,
Yeah.
and how they were feeling. They were struggling, and we provided them with a coach who is going to be here to help them. And I don't think we have answers really, but it's just giving them more tools in their toolbox to put out fires as they come and be proactive in some strategies. Um, Myself, I spend about from 8:30 to 9:30. My goal is to be throughout the hallways, and I go into each little room, especially when I look at the data. What rooms are the rooms that we're dealing with? Pop in, hey, how's it going today? Give them a little hug or a fist bump, just to show them, hey, I'm here, I'm paying attention, and then hopefully be proactive in that strategy. But as you're aware, meetings happen in the morning. Sometimes I can't be there.
Yep.
And then it seems like, we have like, I call it the middle finger. Wednesday, Thursday is like our behaviors. And it kind of, for
Yeah.
some reason, peters out to the weekend. And so we're just trying to provide staff with more strategies and support being visible in a building.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I will say all the educators that I talk to that have really been successful, administrators specifically, that have really been successful, the number one thing that they say is visibility. Visibility is key. Staff have to see you and they have to know that you're there. That is huge to staff feeling safe and secure, and it's huge for students feeling safe and secure as well. And it is one of the biggest factors that turns schools around as far as having significant behaviors, which I've seen. I've worked in a number of schools that have had significant behaviors with like 20 to 30% of their students being tier threes. And within, a year's time, we're seeing, two, three kids that are still on tier three level and everything, which is, I mean, that's what we do. We go into schools and we take the tier threes. And once the tier threes are no longer there, we move on to another district. And that sort of thing. But that's huge as far as staff feeling like they can manage situations and feeling like they can be empowered to be able to do that, as being able to have that leadership visibility within a school and that sort of thing makes a
Yeah,
huge
truly.
difference. Huge difference. Um, do you feel like you've been enjoying this transition, that it's been a comfortable transition for you? It's great that you've had such a strong mentor.
I love it. I really do. Something about these elementary kids just brings like life to me. I
It's a
really look
huge
forward to coming.
difference from
Yeah,
elementary to you walk in and they're like, "You're
yes, it is the biggest difference. I've always been I was a pep rally MC. I was a class advisor. I've always a peppy guy. Get some high school kids who get into it, but every elementary kid
oh
is
yeah,
high
they live,
fiving, fist
yeah,
bumping, hugging.
yep,
Like I love that. It gives me energy. I'm an extrovert to the max. Um, yeah, it's been a good transition for me. The hardest thing for me is I took on a Title One coordinator role. That's been new.
a
Doing
lot,
the
yeah,
grant work and like that's a completely different thing for me. But in terms of my job as an AP, I love it. I
that's
really
great.
do, and I urge people who are on like teetering on the jump of doing admin. If you think you can make connections with kids, do it because
Yeah,
they
we
need
need
you.
it. We need it. We
They
need
need you.
administrators so badly.
Yeah,
It's definitely an area that is suffering nationwide. We need educators, we need administrators, and find a strong mentor and people that can help you along the way because it's vital. Our schools really desperately need that. Zach, anything else you'd like to share with our community?
no, I just want to say to everybody, please support public education. We need you. Families, put the phones down, be with your kids, be present, and that's all. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.